It's a pleasure to welcome you to Chapter 1, Lesson 1, How to Get to Your Budget. We're going to cover both obligatory costs, not to miss out, and optional costs that you might want to think about as you're putting your budget together. So, the first one we're going to cover is notaire fees. So, notaires in France have a much bigger role than you might think of a notary in the US. They have to be involved in all property transactions, and their fees cover the legal searches and paperwork. Um, they do searches on the property to make sure the owner owns it and there are no impediments to that ownership or liens on it or anything like that. And it also covers the French taxes on the transaction. They vary between departments and also on the price of the property, but the estimate usually given is 7 to 11%. There are websites around that will estimate the fees for you, and you just need to put in the department that you're thinking about buying and the price of the property. The exception is new builds, much lower notaire fees, 2 to 3%. The buyer always pays the notaire fees. So the seller, they don't pay any notaire fees on the transaction. You as the buyer will always pay them. You can have one or two notaires working on the deal. So the notaire, they're government representatives, they're impartial, they can work for both sides, and that happens a lot of times. If you prefer to have your own notaire, you can have a separate notaire to the seller. It doesn't increase your fee, it's still the same, 7 to 11%. What happens when two notaires work, they just split the fee element between them. So what about real estate agency fees? You might have seen some listings where there's a fee split out in the listing and others where there isn't. So why is that? And does one mean an additional cost for you and the other not? Well, no. So let's go over this now. The real estate agency fees in France, they're always funded by the buyer, but the way the contracts work with the seller, they can state that either the seller pays or the buyer pays. The buyer is still funding it in either scenario, but there can be a technical difference on, like, there's slight difference in the fee level, and some sellers like to have a contract that says the buyer is paying the fee, even though the buyer in reality is always funding the fee. So where it's split out, that means that the contract says that the buyer pays the fee, and then you're covered by French consumer law. So the fee has to be transparent, and that's why you see it on the listing. It doesn't really matter in terms of your budget for this, because in France, the fees should always be included in the list price that you see. So either way round, the fee's included in the list price. So even if when you see the fee in the listing that's split out, that's not an addition on top of the list price that you see. It should already be included. The only time is if, like a direct sale, there's obviously no fees there because there's no agent involved. You might be wondering, isn't the involvement of an agent also mandatory, just like the notaire? Well, no, actually, it's quite common in France for there to be no agent involved at all. The stats are around about 40% of all property transactions in France take place without an agent. So what optional costs should you consider? Well, the one time that you might pay an additional agent fee is if you hire an extra agent. So it's becoming more popular in France to hire a property hunter or a buyer agent, and that is somebody who will contract with you to search for properties for you. They won't have any listings themselves, and they might work with the listing agencies and split the fee, but probably they'll charge you a fee in addition. Maybe something up front, or maybe just a success fee at the end. They don't have to publish their fees on the website, unlike the listing agents. So you'd have to explore the option in more detail to find out what you'd need to budget. Renovation costs, probably the biggest extra optional cost if you're considering doing that. You can sometimes get an idea for the costs on a property from the diagnostic reports that are a legal obligation for the seller to provide. Particularly, there's an energy efficiency report called a DPE, and that can have costs in there on bringing the property up to a higher energy efficiency rating, and maybe the heating and cooling system. Otherwise, you would have to hire a builder to walk around with you. They might charge, they might not. And the diagnostic report's one thing to say you might consider is a structural survey. So the diagnostic reports are paid for by the seller. They don't include, as standard, a structural survey. So if you want a structural survey on a property, you will have to find, hire, and pay for it yourself. But there are people that can do it in France in English. You might want to hire a translator either for viewings or for some of the legal paperwork. You might want to pay to get some of the legal paperwork translated professionally for you rather than rely on one of the online apps. You might see the word safer on the screen. It's pronounced Safer in French, and that is a government organisation that deals with farmland. So in France, when you buy a property, if it comes with land, or even the house itself, can be subject to certain preemption rights. So the town or village or the department or various other organisations might be able to say, oh, we want to buy that property, and so it has to go to them. They get a month or 2 months to consider whether they want to buy it or not. Very rarely does anything ever get triggered, but it can delay the process. So Safer has 2 months normally to decide if it wants to buy the land that comes with the property in certain areas. You can pay an extra fee to speed that process up. So you can speed it up to 72 hours, 15 days, or 1 month. The fee varies. So sometimes that's an extra cost to consider. And the last thing I have written down there is furniture. It's quite normal in France for some of the furniture to be sold as part of the property deal. Sometimes it can form part of the negotiation to be included in the price, or sometimes it can be an additional negotiation for like an extra fee on top of list price. But it's quite a normal thing to consider. So I just wanted to say a couple of things here about when you're searching. You know, you've got to your budget now. You've included lots of different things that you've thought about. Properties in France, they do sell for list price, but more often than not, there's going to be some level of negotiation. So if I were you, I would start your search a little bit higher than you've calculated your budget for. When you're working with a real estate agent, though, I would probably go a little bit lower because they're going to go higher anyway. And if you've gone higher and told them a bit higher, then you might be getting into sort of unrealistic price numbers. So it's better to kind of try and manage that up front. Or you can be very straight with them and say, do not suggest anything over this. I won't look at it. So to recap in our budget lesson here, unless you're planning a significant renovation, notaire fees might be the biggest cost. Unless you hire an extra agent, the agent fees should be included. And it goes without saying, you've bought property before, I'm sure, have a contingency. There's always something that isn't included in the budget that can come up.